on with the tar sands movement at the moment, the first thing I just wanted to say is that tar sands are getting bigger and they are getting worse. We've just got confirmation now that the carbon intensity of each barrel of tar sands oil is actually increasing over the last 10 years rather than decreasing like the industry keeps liking to tell us. So that aside, there's plans to double, triple the amount of production over the next 20, 30 years in line with about 6 degrees of global warming. So as ever, is a really important issue to be campaigning on. And there are a few really key moments coming up that we can affect from Europe. So obviously the Keystone XL pipeline is a huge target at the moment in the US. But the flip side of that is the EU Fuel Quality Directive, which you've probably heard of because it's been dragging on for about 2 or 3 years. But if you haven't heard of it, it is a piece of EU legislation that would discourage the import of tar sands derived fuels into the EU. And it has the potential to basically block off one of the biggest potential markets to Canada and set a precedent for other markets to raise similar blocking measures to the tar sands oil as well. And that in combination with these pipelines not getting built out of Alberta, basically are going to just landlock the bitumen and kind of just make the oil completely worthless if there's no one there to buy it. So what we can do from the EU is not just influence that legislation with an eye of keeping Europe free of tar sands, which is obviously also a nice aim, but our aim is to actually scupper the whole expansion process. So what we're doing on that at the moment is trying to build a coalition of groups that want to really raise the profile of the Fuel Quality Directive, not just in the UK, but in other key countries in Europe, such as France and Germany and the Netherlands, which have also been blocking the process. The UK has been one of the worst in terms of being very receptive to Canadian government and oil industry lobbying. And while at the last vote they didn't actually block the legislation, they did abstain, and our hope is that at the next vote we can get them to vote in favour. So it would be really great to have support from lots of different organisations on that, and we're hoping to build up to a big sort of public event in the way that has happened with the Keystone XL pipeline, getting thousands of people out to actually see it as an icon of trying to stop the tar sands, even though that's quite difficult obviously because it is a piece of legislation and it's not as visual and sort of obvious a target as a pipeline, but I think we can hopefully do something similar. Just briefly, some of the other things that we're working on at the moment are trying to stop Shell from doubling its tar sands operations. It's currently proposed 2 new huge mines on the traditional territory of the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation, and they're fighting really hard to stop Shell's new projects. They've not only sued Shell for past violations of promises that they've broken, but they've now also mounted a constitutional challenge with the aim of highlighting that Shell hasn't adequately consulted the community about their plans. And if this is successful, it wouldn't just prevent that operation from going ahead, but it could impact the whole industry and void thousands of other leases that would have similarly not adequately consulted with First Nations communities. So over the next few months, we're going to really try and get that issue more talked about in the UK and in other parts of the world, so that we can really back up the small community that doesn't have a huge amount of resources to get the word out themselves. But if we can act in solidarity with them, it will be an amazing chance to just stop some actual tar sands projects from happening in the first place, and potentially set this wider precedent. And then another thing that we're doing at the moment is continuing our campaign against oil sponsorship of arts and cultural and other kinds of institutions in London. Just yesterday there was a launch of a new group called Shell Out Sounds, which was protesting against Shell's sponsorship of the South Bank Centre. And there was a pop-up choir that sang a 3-part harmony called Art Not In Your Name, and it was about all of Shell's operations around the world, and it was in the interval of a Shell-sponsored concert at Queen Elizabeth Hall. So we're continuing that, and we're continuing to target BP, and we'll be at both BP and Shell's AGMs this year, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to have people involved in both protesting at BP and Shell's AGMs and getting involved in the arts campaign as well. So yeah, basically there's lots going on, and we'd very much welcome people to get involved.